Hi, I'm Kristen Goodwin. On this episode of the Fox News Rundown, Americans facing yet another anxiety-filled holiday season as federal officials warn there could be a massive wave of COVID-19 infections by January. Fox News anchor Bill Hemmer weighs in on the current uptick in virus cases and speculation over whether President Biden will run again in 2024. And despite growing fears surrounding the coronavirus, the Transportation Security Administration estimates the volume of passengers at airports nationwide through December will approach pre-pandemic levels. Aviation expert Mike Boyd shares his insight on whether airlines and airports are ready for the busy travel week ahead. Plus, Fox Across America host Jimmy Fallon shares his thoughts on the world's richest person, Elon Musk, being chosen as Time Magazine's Person of the Year. The Fox News Rundown is a daily news podcast where we take a deeper look at the stories important to you. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast player by going to foxnewspodcast.com.
I'm Emily Campagno.
I'm Guy Benson.
I'm Shannon Bream, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Friday, December 17th, 2021. I'm Chris Foster. The new Omicron coronavirus variant may spread faster but get most people less sick, which has Fox's Bill Hemmer cautiously optimistic.
When they mutate and get stronger, that's bad news for us. When they mutate and get weaker, we know the virus itself is running its course and eventually, sooner more than later, will die out.
I'm Lisa Brady. The latest COVID surge isn't stopping the holiday rush.
The CEO of Frontier Airlines quite correctly said people are getting kind of burnout on this COVID thing, and I think they're more and more willing to take a chance, if you want to call it that, taking trips in the future.
And I'm Jimmy Fallon. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
Christmas Eve is a week from tonight after a lot of Americans skipped seeing friends and family last year because of the coronavirus pandemic and vaccines around the corner. COVID-19 deaths and hospitalizations are on the rise now, and some of those people who'd been feeling like things were back to normal also have concerns about this new Omicron variant. White House Chief Medical Advisor Dr. Anthony Fauci says booster shots are recommended, but that what we have works.
Our booster vaccine regimens work against Omicron. At this point, there is no need for a variant-specific booster.
And even for a lot of people who've been taking the virus seriously, it's back to Christmas as usual.
I'm going to get together with my family, and I'm not going to have a lot of concern.
Bill Hemmer is the co-host of America's Newsroom, weekday mornings 9 to 11 Eastern on Fox News Channel.
I've been vaccinated. I've had the booster. So too is just about everybody in my family, I think, if not everyone. Got a few youngins in the crowd who have probably not likely gone in for it. Listen, I listen to the experts. I listen to people like Dr. Mark Siegel. He's been studying this stuff for 20 years. And when I've got a question about what I'm going to do, I call him and I say, what do you think about this, that, and the other? He very early on said the vaccine was the best vaccine that humankind had ever made with the mRNA. And when he said that, that made an impact on me. And I trust him and I take him for his word. I will say that I feel immeasurably more comfortable because I feel I have been protected through the vaccine. This past week, I was at Madison Square Garden. You've got 19,000 people there, and they're checking the vaccination status of people go inside. I don't know how they did it, actually. I think some of the ushers were kind of passive, shall I suggest? But I felt comfortable being there, and if people wanted to wear a mask, they could do it. I think the days of wearing a mask, fortunately, will continue to dwindle in the new year. That's my feeling.
With this Omicron, the early sense is that it's more transmissible, but maybe less severe, especially if you're vaccinated. It seems to me that this may be another case where the unvaccinated are going to be even more in trouble here because this variant is going to go through those communities pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think that is a possibility. And if you listen to the experts, that's the warning out there. Delta was contagious, and it seems to be more harmful than Omicron. And if you follow the news out of South Africa, it has not changed much over the past couple of weeks. They said the world was overreacting. They said most cases were mild. They said in most cases there was no hospitalization required. they said the trend for them seems to be diminishing. Now, I know it's early on that, but it seems to be heading in that direction. If that's true in South Africa, and if we're dealing with the same new variant here in the United States, I would expect, although highly contagious, but not nearly as lethal or harmful. So my guess is sometime around mid-January toward the end of next month, we're gonna have a pretty good handle on this latest variant, and then we'll see what else is out there. But I think generally speaking, listeners need to follow what we have learned about viruses. When they mutate and get stronger, that's bad news for us. When they mutate and get weaker, we know the virus itself is running its course and eventually, sooner more than later, will die out.
Back to Christmas. How about presents? Now, we were warned months ago, you better order early, mail stuff early, because of problems with the supply chain and whatnot. For me, it's been so far so good around here. How about you?
Yeah, that's my experience. I think so far so good as well. There was one gift that I was getting from a high-end store in New York for a person that I had to buy a high-end gift for, to be honest with you. And it's not available yet. And they said, give us your email. We'll send you the email when it's in. So I'm waiting on that. I don't know when it comes in. I doubt if it will be for the holidays. So that might be one of those things that gets stuck up in the system that we do not see until the new year. But other than that, I agree with you. I think so far it's been pretty good.
Stuff's more expensive now, not just high-end stuff, but okay, we won't know this month's number for a bit, but last month had a 6.8 annual inflation rate, 6.8%. This new Fox Business poll has a lot of Americans blaming President Biden for this. Inflation's high in a lot of countries, but it's higher here. Now, the president says it's a priority, but I'm not sure what he is doing about it and what he realistically can do about it.
Yeah, my feeling was, it can be a long answer. Interrupt me whenever you want. On the port system, going back to the supply issue, I felt as if somebody in the administration, maybe it was Pete Buttigieg, he would be the likely candidate there, should have been in the port of Long Beach or should have been in the port of L.A. saying, we're on the job, we're going to figure it out. I think that would have been a good, strong message to the American people and to the world. That did not happen. I don't know why. With regard to inflation, this is a nasty bug we've got here. And the problem is we don't know how much worse it could get. But we have seen what it has done already and the level of concern it's provided also. Now, the Fed this past week came out with their plan for the new year. In my opinion, it was not hawkish enough. I would have liked to have seen them do something immediately. Now, they will do something in the coming weeks about buying fewer bonds by the month, what they've been doing a lot of. And then we expect 3 interest rate hikes in the new year. Well, when interest rates are at 0, 3 interest rate hikes are it's not a lot. But being an amateur economist, my position is go ahead and make the bump now. Arm yourself with greater weapons. So not knowing what's around the corner will fortify you with a greater arsenal to go on the offensive. And I think when you're at 0 interest rates, you lack that ability to do it. I mean, Japan's been doing this since the 1990s, and it hasn't worked real well. So that's what I'd like to have seen. With regard to the president, my criticism would be, my observation is that Joe Manchin has gotten in the way of Build Back Better, and who knows how many other Democratic senators are with Manchin on this. I think it's a high likelihood there could be 3 or 4 or 5 who are thinking too much, too fast. You say it's 1.7 trillion. CBO says it's more like 4 trillion. Even if it's somewhere in the middle, do we need that level of spending now when we're dealing with the issues of price controls and inflation? Then you consider what they passed in March and the $1.9 trillion that were passed, the American Rescue Plan toward the end of March, probably was not the greatest move. It was a ton of money, and I would suggest it probably led us down the inflation road faster than we would have gone otherwise. That's my view.
Yeah, no doubt. And Build Back Better, at least, is spread out. Now, the plan that they seem to have settled on so far, this may have to be nixed, was to fund a lot of stuff temporarily and just hope that politically it has to stick. They may end up being better off just picking a couple priorities, like maybe the stuff for kids, like the tax credit or pre-K, and make that permanent and say, and this is our message, this is what we've done for you, the American people?
Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, that's a possibility. I think you might have a civil war within the party. I think there are progressives in the House and a few in the Senate who are all in on getting everything in the law that was in this massive bill. If they go that route, I would suggest there will be a lot of hesitation, a lot of disappointment. What I think Biden has been trying to do for the past year is keep the party together. And if they go that route, that might be a surefire way to create a fissure within the Democratic Party, which I believe then would be one of the most critical political stories of 2022 in the new year, and something that everybody needs to pay attention to, because then the warts would come out and we'd see all of it between the progressives and the moderates in the Democratic Party.
And well, if they don't pass anything at all, that's going to hurt them in 2022 as well. So it's
maybe. Listen, there are some analysts already saying that the best thing possible is to make sure that the filibuster stays intact and make sure that Build Back Better doesn't pass, and that would allow the economy to take its course, and we'll see what comes from that, and that might allow Joe Biden some breathing room, not to pass something in a 50-50 Senate and a nearly 50-50 House.
Yeah. The president's approval ratings at about 44% on average. President Trump this time during his presidency, I looked it up this morning, December of 2021. He was.
Can I guess?
Sure.
37?
43.
Got it.
And he ended up, losing in 2020. But it's early time still. But you'd rather be more popular than where Joe Biden is now and where Donald Trump was then.
Yes, my feeling is it's a good parlor game to think about 2024. But it is entirely too. If you and I were flying to the moon tonight, that would be the distance of travel that it would take us to get there. And that's kind of like when political years, what we're dealing with. There's plenty of time for Biden to turn this thing around. There's plenty of time to get certain issues sorted. But that will not stop the media during what others would consider a somewhat slow news time to talk about it.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, I'm guilty of it. You're probably guilty of it in certain segments. I mean, there's already talk about, well, who's going to run in 2024? It's not going to be Biden. I mean, policy fan or not, though, he is going to be 82 right after the next election day. His second term would end when he's 86. I mean, I know it's just sort of idle speculation now, but it's fair.
But he has said just this past week, in fact, that he assured people that he will be the candidate in 2024. Now, listen, that can all change in the next 3 years. But, I mean, if you're a sitting president, what you don't want to say is, I'm a one-termer and I'm done. Because if that's the case, other people are going to be taking shots from you, from the other party, from your own party, and your chances of getting greater legislation passed diminish, in my view.
Bill Hemmer, thanks a lot, man. Host of America's Newsroom, along with Dana Perino, 9 to 11 Eastern mornings on Fox News Channel. Bill, always a pleasure.
Right on. Merry Christmas. Good to be with you.
You too.
This is Jimmy Fallon with your Fox News commentary coming up.
If Christmas is anything like Thanksgiving, the roads and the airports will soon be crowded. AAA expects more than 109 million people to travel at least 50 miles from home, up more than 1/3 over last year. And for airlines, nearly triple the number of holiday travelers, assuming Omicron doesn't spark a widespread change of plans. More than once over Thanksgiving week, TSA screenings topped 2 million in a single day, a pandemic record. At a Senate hearing on Wednesday, executives from several major airlines thanked lawmakers for more than $50 billion in taxpayer-funded relief after COVID largely grounded the travel industry last year.
I want to state it succinctly and unequivocally. The payroll support program has been an overwhelming success.
American Airlines CEO Doug Parker says the program saved the airline industry, but there have been some staffing issues as travel has rebounded, especially for American and Southwest, which each had major disruptions this fall. Parker says they couldn't fill extra shifts quickly enough to adjust to issues like unusual weather.
We don't have the ability to recover as quickly.
So, are the airlines ready for the rest of the holiday season?
Oh, yeah, they're perfectly ready for it.
Mike Boyd is a former airline executive, now a consultant and president of Boyd Group International.
The only thing that can happen is if there's a snowstorm over Chicago or over Dallas-Fort Worth or a connecting hub like that, that'll screw things up, but that can do that anytime. We're looking at probably a situation where the Christmas holiday is going to go fairly smoothly.
Some people might be surprised to hear that only because of recent disruptions in the run-up to Thanksgiving, especially some articles and pundits that maybe tried to tie it to labor shortages and even vaccine mandates. There's kind of been give and take on that.
Well, the reality is we had Southwest Airlines had an event where air traffic control shut down large parts of the Southeast where a good portion of their fleet goes. That messed them up badly. The same thing with American Airlines with a weather event at their biggest hub at Dallas-Fort Worth. That can always happen. But remember, there's not a labor shortage. What shortage might be there is really not enough pilots when things really get out of whack, where a pilot's stuck in, let's just say, Sarasota for 3 hours and he can't get to Atlanta to get his next flight going out to Chicago. That screws things up for hours, but it's not necessarily a case of not people being able to load an airplane.
And so when it comes to recent disruptions, it sounds like you don't really attribute any of the issues to mandates, pandemic-related mandates.
Oh, no, not at all. We don't know what happened with Southwest Airlines when we had an air traffic control issue, whether the FAA had some sort of a labor issue at their Jacksonville center, we don't know. But as far as the airline industry goes, no, mandates have nothing to do with it.
Some major airlines have just recently announced plans to hire thousands more people. Is that a continuing recovery from the pandemic furloughs?
Well, sure, because a lot of people who were furloughed just didn't want to come back. The other issue is we do have an issue with pilot training and flight attendant training. But remember, you can't go out to LaGuardia Airport and start throwing bags right away for an airline. There's training that is mandated you have to go through, so it takes time. But yeah, they're going to be hiring because it looks like 2022 domestically will be a pretty strong year. It won't be like 2019, but it's going to be about 873 million people getting on airplanes.
When we hear about a peak travel day with more than 2 million TSA screenings, it sounds like things are pretty normal. So how far off is the airline industry or the travel industry more broadly from where it was before the pandemic?
All right, well, just a number. 2019, we had about 983 million people getting on airplanes. This year, we're going to have about 630 million. That's way down from 986 million. Next year, we're going to have about 870 million. So the industry is smaller. There's no question about it for a variety of reasons. But, when airplanes don't get packed, they get full. Not the 7th Avenue subway. When they have all 130 seats occupied, they're full.
And those numbers, you're talking domestically or globally travel?
No, this is U.S. airports again in 2019 had 986 million people getting on airplanes. That's not passengers. That's people boarding. The passenger number was closer to about 700 million because, a lot of passengers make two enplanements. But that's the volume going through airports then. It's going to be way down this year, but up from last year. And next year will be up, but it's not going to be back to 2019 levels for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm. I know business travel isn't what it once was. I mean, they're just, doing so much more remotely, at least for now, but that's something that might continue going forward.
Well, the issue of remote travel, business travel was declining before the pandemic hit. I mean, an example was you had about 40,000 business travelers 30 years ago going between Albany and Boston. Today, there's nobody. Why? Because you don't need to travel. Air travel's role as a communication channel has changed. Things like electronic meetings, far more effective in many, many cases. And that's been accelerated by the pandemic, but it was coming anyway.
One thing that hasn't changed are the costs besides the ticket price, like baggage fees. Does this surprise you? I mean, should they be doing more to coax travelers back?
Well, I think, we mere mortals cannot dream of the kind of fees airlines will be dreaming up in the future. Nevertheless, it is a part of their revenue stream. And again, there are people that will tell you, if I don't check a bag, why should I pay for somebody else to check a bag? Kind of a specious argument, but that's what they're getting to. But to your point, I believe Southwest Airlines is making hundreds of millions of dollars more because they don't charge for luggage and they don't have change fees. So more people fly them. And I think that might be a lesson for other airlines to look at.
The FAA and the industry have been warning about potential disruptions as wireless carriers begin to use the C-band spectrum for 5G services, something which right now is being delayed. What exactly is the danger here? Can you kind of put that into layman's terms for us?
Well, anybody's computer has ever been hacked can tell you all about it. The fact is that we have a system that makes our air transportation system less safe, possibly, or vulnerable to hacking. That has to be dealt with before we go any further. 5G is wonderful stuff, but if it puts our air transportation system at risk to someone hacking or just simply not being as efficient as it could be, it's got to be delayed.
Is it an issue also of possibly interfering with the instruments on the planes in flight? Is that part of the issue?
As I understand it, there's all kinds of issues with it where it could affect the safe operation of airplanes. But again, there's also the security side of this as well. But again, those have to be addressed because, again, when airplanes today flying were designed, let's say 20 years ago, there was no 5G. I don't think there was a 1G. So we've got to look at what our technology is and how we can use that technology. And we have a long way to go, I think, for 5G.
The wireless companies say this is just fear-mongering, that it's already being done in nearly 40 other countries. So would you ultimately expect a solution on this issue?
Well, there'll be a solution, but keep in mind, these wireless companies have a lot of dogs in the fight financially, and they're going to fight to tell you it isn't really accurate. I would take the word of the FAA and airlines, over a wireless operator, and they mean well. But the fact is, if there's even a hint of a problem, we shouldn't do it.
It seems like something that maybe will be debated for a while yet. Are you concerned at all about the potential outcome? I mean, let's say if the FCC and the FAA and the airlines, can all get together and work it out, how confident would you feel about whatever the solution is?
I would be very confident because this is clearly a technical issue. There's no politics involved. There's nothing else involved other than the technologies involved. So if they come up with something, I will guarantee you it'll be probably as safe as a hand-to-man can make it.
What about this new COVID variant? It's really thrown a wrench into things, reimposed mask mandates in various states and various countries. Canada came out this week, the health minister there, and told people, look, avoid non-essential travel abroad if you can, because it's spreading so rapidly. That would seem to be just what the travel industry does not need.
It's kind of a double-edged sword in the sense that they don't need this right now. And more and more countries are going to level 4, the high risk in the EU. Now, here in the U.S., I think we're a little more rational. I don't know how much more rational about dealing with it. But what we have now is a lot of people who are going to take vacations in Europe, read this stuff and say, I'm going to go to Boca Raton instead. So it could be sort of a backhanded way of getting more people on flights this summer taking vacations. But it is a concern. But to this point, it doesn't look like it's another variant that's going to be really critical. And another point that needs to be made, I think it was Barry Biffle, the CEO of Frontier Airlines, quite correctly said, people are getting kind of burnout on this COVID thing. And I think they're more and more willing to take a chance, if you want to call it that, taking trips in the future. What is your advice for travelers at this point as they navigate not only this holiday season, but the ongoing pandemic? Well, the ongoing pandemic, we don't know. I mean, like, for example, wearing masks on airplanes. Airline CEOs just told the Senate that these masks don't make any sense, and they don't because we don't know what a mask is. There's no definition. And that means there's no real definition of how effective it is or isn't. But things like that don't help air travel. My feeling with people, though, if you have that mandate and the airlines have to enforce it, understand it's not the airline's rule, and don't beat up the flight attendant. That would be my first number one suggestion to anybody flying. The people walking up and down the aisle at the airline are not the ones who are making you wear a mask. Somebody else is. Mike Boyd, former airline executive, now consultant and president of Boyd Group International. Thank you very much for your time. Hey, thank you.
from the Fox News Podcasts Network.
I'm Ben Domenech, publisher of The Federalist, and I'm inviting you to join a new conversation with the smartest thinkers out there about the country and where we're going. Subscribe to the Ben Domenech Podcast.
Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com. Subscribe to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com.
And now, some good news with Tanya J. Powers.
For this week's good news, we take you to the world of international sports, specifically football. And when I say football, I mean soccer. One of the most heartwarming traditions in the sport happened this week when fans of Spanish top-flight club Real Betis brought teddy bears and cuddly toys to a game to be donated to underprivileged kids. And if you're thinking that they dropped the items in a collection bin out front or something, think again. The Real Betis fans have a tradition of throwing the toys onto the soccer pitch during halftime. This one was during their match with Real Sociedad. Fans are asked to bring soft toys no larger than 35 centimeters, about 13 inches tall, and with no batteries included. The place was packed with more than 52,000 people in the stands, and when the annual event was over, about 19,000 teddy bears and cuddly toys were on the pitch. Picture it. The green soccer pitch was littered with thousands of them in bright colors, soft brown teddy bears as well as pink and yellow ones, large panda bears, a cow, a dinosaur, several unicorns, even a stuffed purple octopus. A rainfall of cute, cuddly toys while Bobby Helms' Jingle Bell Rock played in the background. There was also a bit of teamwork involved. When the toys were thrown from the upper seats, folks in the lower deck picked them up and threw them onto the pitch. And when it looks like they're running out of toys, they just keep coming. It's one of the best videos you will see this week. The Real Betis fans look like they're having a big time, a feeling that undoubtedly got better when their team won 4-0. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
It's time for your Fox News commentary.
Jimmy Fallon.
What's on your mind?
So Elon Musk has been named Time Magazine's Person of the Year. He follows in the footsteps of last year's winner, Joe Biden, who could win it again this year, because it turns out you can't be Person of the Year if you don't know what year it is. Okay, so that was a cheap shot at the president, but in my defense, it's the only thing cheap given the inflation he's caused. Elon Musk caused all of us to look towards a day where commercial space travel is a real possibility thanks to his SpaceX rockets. Think about it. Pretty soon, E.T. won't have to phone home. He'll catch an Uber thanks to Elon Musk. He might even take some Bitcoin with him now that Musk mainstreamed the digital currency by tweeting and talking about it all the time. Sure, none of us understand how it works, but we've all heard of it by now. It's like the Kardashians of currency, meaning we don't know why it's worth so much money, but man, does it get around. But it was Musk's decision to relocate his company from the overtaxed, overregulated state of California to freedom-loving Texas that won me over. I don't use Bitcoin, and the way I'm eating this month, I'm never going to fit into one of his spacesuits, but if more people follow his lead in pushing back on government regulations and mandates, pretty soon this whole country will be cleared for liftoff. I'm Jimmy Fallon.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com. New from the Fox News Podcasts Network.
My name is Kennedy, and welcome to my podcast, which will, I humbly say, single-handedly save the world. You're welcome.
It's Kennedy Saves the World. Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust. And click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.